Inspired by the so-called Gen Z protests in Kenya and Nepal, the
et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa.
Okay.
Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
Six o'clock Central African time, which means it's time to rise and shine right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. Good morning, my name is Peter Ndoro, and we're broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, on the internet, at www.channelafrica.co.za. And you can also catch us on your mobile apps. Just go to your app store, look for SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and then look for Channel Africa. And we're also streaming live on social media. In fact, you can get onto YouTube right now, Channel Africa, and you can watch radio. A very good morning to you, Asanda Beda.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this 30th of September. We've wrapped up the month of heritage in South Africa, and that's where we are. Thank you for choosing us to wake up with. In this hour, we'll be looking at police in Madagascar's capital who have fired tear gas at thousands of protesting young people, and Zambia has called for urgent reform at the United Nations. Those stories and more coming up, but let's start with our news. Here's Dlalane Tulo Ongwepe with those details, and then following her with sports headlines is Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. A special court in South Sudan has ruled that it does have the jurisdiction to prosecute suspended Vice President Riek Machar and 7 co-accused who are charged with murder, treason and crimes against humanity. The court dismissed all objections by Machar's legal team regarding its authority, the constitutionality of the proceedings and the claim that he was immune from prosecution. The charges stem from an attack in March by a militia allegedly linked to Machar, which killed 250 soldiers and a general. Since then, he has been under house arrest. The case will continue on Wednesday. Police in Madagascar's capital fired tear gas at thousands of people who returned to the streets yesterday for a third round of youth-led protests against water and power cuts. The protesters are calling for the government's resignation. Inspired by the so-called Gen Z protests in Kenya and Nepal, the demonstrations are the largest the Indian Ocean island has seen in years, and the most serious challenge President Andre Rajoelina has faced since his re-election in 2023. The medical charity Doctors Without Borders has suspended its operations in the Mokemboa da Paira in northern Mozambique, citing rising insecurity. MSF says violence has made it impossible to provide vital services such as emergency and maternity care in parts of Cabo Delgado province. The BBC's Richard Cargo has the story.
The suspension is a major setback for thousands of vulnerable people who depend on MSF for medical care at the main district hospital. It's the second time in 2 months the charity has raised concern over disruption to its activities in the insurgency-hit region. MSF is calling for the protection of civilians, health workers and medical facilities from the violence. The army has deployed additional troops after militant attacks forced residents to flee their homes and farms. Violence has escalated since regional forces withdrew last year.
Advocate Matthew Chaskelson, a senior counsel, has been appointed as the new chief evidence leader at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, which is probing criminal infiltration, political interference and corruption in South Africa's criminal justice system. This follows reports that chief evidence leader Terry Mudau has requested to step down from the commission. The commission will continue this morning, where Crime Intelligence Head General Dumisani Khumalo will continue with his evidence. Swatle Mota reports.
While speculation remains high over Advocate Mudau's departure and the reasons behind it, the Madlanga Commission has also remained mum. However, proceedings will continue on Tuesday morning, where General Khumalo will proceed with his testimony on the criminal cartel that has infiltrated the criminal justice system. General Khumalo has already testified in the commission that police are investigating 3 other cartel bosses after cracking down on 2 other members, namely Vusi Kedmatlala and Katiso KT Mulife.
A UN-backed investigation says it has found clear evidence that the Burmese army has replaced the Rohingya villages and homes it destroyed in Myanmar's Rakhine state with military infrastructure. More than 1 million people from the Muslim minority fled the offensive in 2017. Barasan Itirajan has the details.
The report by the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar said a security base had been built over the remains of villages in Rakhine State, following what the UN described at the time as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. New roads, buildings, fortified compounds, and 2 helipads have been constructed on lands cleared of houses. The report is based on the first-hand accounts of witnesses, satellite imagery, video footage, and official records. There has been no reaction to the report from the Myanmar military.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Gayton McKenzie reacts to FIFA's ruling to deduct 3 points from Bafana Bafana. And world number 1 Carlos Alcaraz takes on Taylor Fritz in the Japan Open final. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
And with those new stories, and this new day is the Africa Roundup. This is the feature in the show where we bring you up to speed to some stories making headlines in and around our continent that you may have missed. And we also serve as a throw forward to what to expect to develop in the space of news. And our team of researchers, our reporters and compilers as well as editors put this together for you so we are on the same level in terms of what we need to know. So today we start with Madagascar, and police in Madagascar's capital fired tear gas on Monday at thousands of people who returned to the streets for a third round of youth-led protests against water and power cuts, with many calling for the government's resignation.
Inspired by the so-called Gen Z protests in Kenya and Nepal, the demonstrations are the largest Madagascar has seen in years, and the most serious challenge President Andry Rajoelina has faced since his re-election in 2023. Authorities declared a dusk-to-dawn curfew on Thursday after protests in the capital, Antananarivo, turned violent. The latest protests came after Rajoelina said on Sunday he would thoroughly review and reform the governance in the country.
Zambia has called for urgent reform at the United Nations, highlighting the need for a more representative Security Council, climate justice and debt relief. Speaking at the 80th UN General Assembly, UNGA, Foreign Minister Mlambo Haimbe warned that wars and global crises risk erasing decades of progress and pledged Zambia's continued focus on peace, women's empowerment and opportunities for young people.
80 years ago, the world emerged from war with a promise to never again allow division and destruction to define our collective future. That promise is being tested today. Let this 80th General Assembly be remembered as a turning point where the world chose solidarity over silence, justice over inertia, and unity over division. We must act not out of fear, but out of hope, not in isolation, but in solidarity, as we are better together.
Cameroon's presidential campaign is underway with President Paul Biya's supporters, including Bur Mayor David Mafani, highlighting his long-standing experience. Meanwhile, challenger Cabral Libi drew large crowds in Douala, with supporter Claire Akota calling for change after more than 4 decades of Biya rule.
The region where I come from, the southwest region, we are faced with some security challenges. We don't want people who are hot-blooded, people who will not be cool as the head of state to lead us at this point in time. We think he has what it takes to lead us at this point in time.
I support him because he has a social project that suits me. And then after 43 years, we are a bit tired. I am from Combe. We are tired of seeing the same thing every day. So we need change.
Opposition leader Patrick Hermani says that he's confident of forming Seychelles' next government as the island heads into a presidential runoff against incumbent Wavel Ramkalwan. Nearly 82% of voters turned out in the first round, which produced no clear winner. Ramkalwan had tried to block a comeback by the party that ruled for 4 decades, but Hermani now aims to rally support ahead of the decisive vote.
Ramkalwan secured 46.4% of the vote, the Electoral Commission said. Just ahead was Hermani with 48.8%. His party also made significant gains in the National Assembly, giving it a clear parliamentary majority.
We are confident that on the 11th we will be forming the next government. Second round, it's okay, we are ready for it.
The two presidential frontrunners will now face off in a decisive second round, scheduled to be held from October 9th to the 11th.
The government in Kenya says its mission in Moscow has repatriated 3 citizens from Russia. It comes after the Foreign Affairs Ministry said it had reports of several Kenyans allegedly forced into Russia's military and later captured in Ukraine. The BBC's Akisa Wandera is in Nairobi.
The announcement follows a security operation in Nairobi late last week where authorities uncovered what they believe is a trafficking syndicate luring citizens with promises of lucrative jobs in Moscow only for them to be forced into Russia's military and deployed to the front line in the war against Ukraine. The case has drawn attention after Ukraine's army released a video of a Kenyan athlete who said he was tricked into joining the Russian military and pleaded to be returned home.
Now, the government in Kenya says that that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. Thanks so much indeed for tuning in for that, and we'll give you another one tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. And as Asanda says, it really is to catch you up with the top news events of the past 24 hours so you start the day well informed. Stay with us because coming up shortly, Asanda will be taking us to East Africa to take a deep dive on some of the top stories that are playing out there.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Okay. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
At 14 minutes past 6 Central African time, let's take a look at some stories making headlines, zooming into the East Africa region of our continent. And we speak to our resident analyst, joins us on Tuesday mornings here on Rise and Shine. That's Dennis Beru, who is journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya. Dennis, how are you this particular Tuesday? It's the end of the month, 30th of September.
Yes, good morning, Asanda. Yes, I'm well. Nairobi, you are doing good. It is sunny here. Hope you are well in South Africa.
We are well. Thank you very much. And let's start with Uganda today. Presidential campaign is the presidential campaign has launched today. We've been in conversations here on Rise and Shine about this in terms of candidates and just the political landscape in the country. But this presidential campaign kicks off in the country for January 2026 elections. It's been seen as a showdown between the current president, Yoweri Museveni, and opposition leader Bobi Wine, even though there are 8 candidates. Is this how you view it?
Yes, thank you so much, Asanda. Of course, the Electoral Commission of Uganda released the official campaign schedule for 8 presidential candidates. Of course, there are 8 presidential candidates to organize, of course, their rallies across the country. Of course,
our signal is a bit bad there.
they try to avoid, clashing the incumbent, that is President Yoweri Museveni, again against, of course, Bobby Wine. Of course, yes, and of course, we've started, having the conversation of that. These are two horse race because in 2021 the two met in the presidential race, and of course, Bobby Wine was defeated and emanated around 36% of the votes. Of course, in a press conference last week, lawmakers highlighted the achievement that the incumbent, that is President Yoweri Museveni, has had in the education sector, infrastructure, and of course on the health sector. But we've had criticism from government, human rights abuses, and suppression of the political opponents. So, Asanda, this is a race that, of course, the Ugandans will be hoping to see change. But of course, as things looks like, of course, this seemed to be a two-horse race, and we've had calls from other presidential candidates in Uganda saying that, of course, the election has already been predetermined because of what happened during the last general election.
For those women who filed nominations with the Electoral Commission in the country, none have made it to be able to contest the elections. What do you make of that?
Of course, we've had, conversation from them.
Dennis, let's try and drop the line.
They talked about, in the elections and
Dennis, we're going to try and drop your line and call you again because the network is quite bad today. So let's see if we get lucky this time around in terms of hearing you clearer. Dennis Beru is our resident analyst talking to us on Tuesdays to give us our East Africa wrap. That is stories that have made headlines in this region of our continent. He is East Africa region journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya. Dennis, I think this time around it will be a much better line. Please continue on that point of women not being represented on the ballots.
Yes.
Yes, continue.
Yeah, of course. We've had conversation about, from the chairperson of the Ugandan Human Rights Commission, Mariam Fauzata Wangajia. Of course, he called on a peaceful, free, and fair election. But of course, we've had, concerns that there's no a single woman who had been declared to vie for the top seats in Uganda. Of course, now this brings to question the integrity, the democracy around the Ugandans and of course the election in Uganda, because having no single woman in the ballot, of course, this is something we should be questioning.
All right, I think we dropped the line there with Dennis. We're going to try and see if we can get a hold of him. We still have another 10 minutes to go before news headlines, so that should give us a bit of time to continue with our chat on the East Africa wrap.
Yo, listen up. Channel Africa is taking the digital game higher.
Check it out.
We are taking our digital platforms to the next level for you, our loyal listener.
You know where we at, right?
New website, a fresh new app, and they're on fire. Anytime, anywhere listening, Channel Africa brings the African sound to you.
It's the bomb, yo.
Stay locked. The future is crystal clear with us. Your new way to experience Channel Africa is almost here. Africa, stand tall and get ready. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
The 9th World Congress of the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, known as SETAC, officially gets underway tomorrow in Johannesburg. Now, the week-long event, held alongside the SETAC Africa 12th biennial meeting, brings together global experts to explore how environmental science policy and practice can drive sustainable development. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange spoke to some of the speakers to find out what delegates can expect.
The CTEC 9th World Conference is expected to draw scientists, policymakers and industry leaders from around the world to discuss pressing environmental challenges. Executive Director for CTEC Global, Bart Bosveld, says the society plays a key role in uniting different sectors to advance environmental science and management.
CTEC is a Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, and it's a worldwide association of environmental scientists working either for government, academia or business. And the mission is to advance environmental science and management. And the way that we think is important that those three sectors come together to make the things work.
Bosveld adds that this year's program is designed to strengthen collaboration across continents.
The program of this meeting is very much focused on making the connections between the different continents and the challenges that we have at this moment, environmental challenges, to see what the scientific developments are, how to manage that.
Senior lecturer at the University of Johannesburg and Vice President of CTEC Africa, Dr. Tareen Lee Botha, says the Congress offers opportunities for networking and knowledge exchange across various scientific disciplines.
We then also have a whole setup of events happening through the week where people can network, sit down, discuss projects, present their work in various themes. So that could be in water, air, soil, human health, animal health, and the whole idea is to bring everything back together so that people can start to share knowledge.
The Congress will welcome participants from across the globe, highlighting its truly international reach.
We are expecting a lot of countries altogether. Participants are from more than 40 countries across the world. It's South Africa, it's Ghana, it's Nigeria, but also from Europe, from Germany, UK, France, Netherlands, Belgium, from Australia, from New Zealand, from North America.
Bosveld says hosting the event in Africa underscores the significance of connecting science across continents.
We choose Africa this time, especially to make that connection and to promote the exchange of science between the different continents.
Dr. Botha says the gathering is also a unique chance for African scientists to engage directly with top international experts.
And we're in a very unique opportunity now where we're having experts from all over the world come to Africa and exposing some international science to our scientists in Africa who maybe usually wouldn't have the opportunity to get to these places. So we have speakers coming from everywhere. Harvard University, Stanford, so there we've got the North Americas represented, but then we have people from Sheffield.
The CTEC 9th World Conference runs officially from September 30th to October 3rd, focusing on sustainable development in a changing world. Organizers say the discussions and connections made here will help shape solutions to some of the planet's most urgent environmental challenges. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebohang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Right, so we'll try next week for our East Africa wrap. We had to let go of our analyst there, Dennis Berry. Our lines are just not working for us on his side, that is, the network issues. These things happen. But we move on now, speaking about the Speakers Conference. The Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, says the ratification of the AFCFTA and its implementation requires collaboration with national parliaments. He was speaking at the opening ceremony of the 13th Annual Conference of Speakers of African National and Regional Parliaments at the Pan-African Parliament in Midrand, South Africa. 49 countries out of the 55 AU members have ratified the AFCFTA agreement. Tlantla Mahlangu reports.
The conference is being held under the theme Transforming Parliaments for Citizen-Driven Continental Integration, Sustainable Development, Prosperity and Peace, and Enhancing Africa's Dynamic Role on the Global Stage. It serves as a high-level platform for parliamentary political leadership to deliberate on strategic issues of continental and global significance. It also seeks to highlight the dual responsibility of parliaments to safeguard democracy and citizens' rights while driving Africa's Transformation Agenda 2063 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The chairperson of the National Council of Provinces of South Africa, Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane, has hailed the theme of the conference.
This theme is necessary as it re-invokes important debates and issues related to trade, climate change, agriculture, technology, peace, security, human solidarity, and prosperity for all. To this extent, we are challenged to take a position reflecting our collective priorities as we confront standing challenges of the past, the present, and the future.
The conference is also exploring how to ensure that the AFCFTA's implementation delivers inclusive benefits, especially for women, youth, and small and medium-sized enterprises, SMMEs. The Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, says national parliaments have an indispensable role to play.
The success of implementation of the AFCFTA depends not only on the executive branch of government, on ministers of trade, but it largely depends on the legislative branch of government, of which you, of course, are the leaders. I therefore urge our national parliament to move with speed to ratify and domesticate or gazette all of the AFCFTA protocols where countries have not yet ratified and gazetted these instruments. To continue to work with us and the Pan-African Parliament to exercise oversight to ensure governments to deliver on tariff reductions, on customs reforms, and trade facilitation commitments.
The main objective of the AFCFTA agreement is to create a single market for goods and services facilitated by movement of persons in order to deepen economic integration of the African continent. President of the Pan-African Parliament, Chief Fortune Charumbira, called on parliamentarians to play an active role in ensuring the success of the AFCFTA.
As parliaments, are we playing our role? Because the AFCFTA, we are told by experts that if we can succeed on this AFCFTA, our economies on the continent will expand by 32%. Now, that will open a lot of opportunities for our youth and everyone. We can expand our economies. So can we, as parliaments, facilitate the facilitation role for such good things to happen?
The conference will on Tuesday address several interrelated priorities that reflect the evolving role of parliaments as agents of integration, development, democracy, and diplomacy. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Tlantla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Let's get our news headlines now. It's almost 6:30 Central African time, just short of about 30 seconds. Jalane Tulo Mwepe has our details.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, a special court in South Sudan has ruled that it does not have the jurisdiction to prosecute suspended Vice President Riek Machar and 7 co-accused who were charged with murder, treason and crimes against humanity. A Nigerian man who was deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he and 6 others were secretly transported to Togo by Ghanaian authorities. And finally, US President Donald Trump has declared that peace in the Middle East is very close as he presented a new plan to end the war in Gaza in the presence of the Israeli Prime Minister. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Time now to catch you up for the first time with your sport. And at the sports desk this morning, we say good morning to Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, guys. We begin with football news. Not so good for South Africa. Sports Minister Gayton McKenzie has reacted to FIFA's ruling to deduct 3 points from Bafana Bafana in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers and the fine of about 250,000 South African rands for fielding an ineligible player, Tebogo Mokoena, in the match against Lesotho in March. He says the developments are deeply regrettable and has brought embarrassment to the nation and the game of football. He acknowledged that this situation has brought South Africa into disrepute, and his department will launch a full investigation into the incompetence that led to this sanction. However, he called on all South Africans to rally behind Bafana Bafana as they prepare for the crucial final 2 qualifiers in Durban and Bombela against Rwanda and Nigeria. Matches Bafana Bafana must win if they want to qualify for next year's World Cup in the Americas. On to rugby news. South Africa have included experienced lock Lua Diaga in the squad for the decisive rugby championship match against Argentina at Twickenham on Saturday after Franco Mostert did not travel with the group due to a family bereavement. Diaga was injured in the record 43-10 victory over New Zealand in Wellington this month, but has been past fit to play coach Rassie Erasmus's side and will name his team today. Defending champions South Africa are in pole position as they seek to retain the rugby championship title. Their 7:30 win over Argentina in Durban in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province on Saturday put them on 15 points at the top of the table, followed by New Zealand 14, 11, Australia 11, and the South African opponents 9, who are out of the running. South Africa's Deputy Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Peace Mabe, is in Spain together with a delegation from Athletics South Africa, Western Cape Athletics, and her department officials to officially receive the flag confirming South Africa as a host of the 2027 World Mountain and Trail Championship. The global showpiece will be staged in Cape Town from the 6th to the 10th of October, marking the first time Africa hosts the event.
80 countries participating in this sport. I was about to say that, and also a historic moment where they will be handing over to South Africa in preparation for the 2027 World Cup that will be hosted in South Africa. The championship World Games, which will be hosted in South Africa.
And now tennis news. World number 1 Carlos Alcaraz will face Taylor Fritz in the Japan Open final after coming from behind to beat Casper Ruud in Tokyo. The Spaniard dropped the opening set, the first he has dropped so far in the tournament, but recovered to beat the Dane 3-6, 6-3 and 6-4. It was Alcaraz's 66th win of the season, and he's the 4th male player in history after Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic to reach 9 successive ATP level finals. Second seed Fritz, who defeated Alcaraz in the Laver Cup last week, beat compatriot Jensen Brooksby 6-4, 6-3 in the other semi-final. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. madapiri pazochitika. Madapiri pazochitika.
boma la dziko la south sudan alengeza kuti wachiwiri kwa mtsogoleri wa dzikolo Riek Machar akuyenera kuyankha mlandu ofuna kulanda dziko wakupha komanso okonza ziwawa, ndipo mtolankhani wathu nkummawa kwa africa Fraser Onene akuwunikirapo.
Muchikalata chomwe chinalengezedwa ndi nduna yoona zamalamulo komanso chilungamo ya dziko la south sudan, chikalatachi chinalengeza kuti wachiwiri kwa president wa dzikolo Riek Machar apezeka ndi milandu yokupha, yofuna kuwukira boma komanso kulanda dziko ndi kuyambitsa ziwawa. Riek Machar akhala akusungidwa zidwa kunyumba kwawo kuyambira mwezi wa Marichi chaka chino. Mwezi wa Marichiwu asilikali omwe mbuyomu anali mgulu lomwe limagwira ntchito limodzi ndi Machar anamenyana ndi asilikali aboma a South Sudan Defense Forces SPDF mu chigawo cha White Nile dziko
Zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi madapiri.
Let's find out now what's happening in the world of business as we say good morning to Tabiso Lehuku with our details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. The Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mining Development in Equatorial Guinea, Antonio Oburu Ondo, says the country will open a new oil and gas licensing round in April to boost exploration and counter dwindling oil output. Ondo says that the licensing round will be launched in the second quarter of 2026, right after the details of timelines, application procedures, and further information will be available. Chandugo Legege reports.
Opening in April and running until November, the licensing round offers 24 blocks, 2 of which are onshore and the rest offshore. Equatorial Guinea is a member of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and currently has 6 producing fields run by companies. The country has produced 241,000 barrels of oil per day at its peak in 2010, but output has since fallen to 55,000 barrels per day in 2023.
South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister, Asha Sarapin, says metros must meet a set of minimum planning and performance requirements before trading services reform can be applied. These include delivering a turnaround business plan, financial transparency, and the appointment of Trading Services Chief Executive. The Deputy Minister was speaking on the sidelines of the National Treasury's Metro Trading Services Reforms Engagement Session in Pretoria. Sarapin says improvement in water, sanitation and electricity services is critical for attracting investment into the cities.
The first is that they had to create a performance improvement plan. The performance improvement plan had to be approved by the council. Secondly, they've got to then decide on the model of reform, and we gave them 3 options. Most have opted to create a business unit, which must have its own balance sheets, must have its own cost of supply study, so that they actually understand what does it cost them to get water from the water board to the reservoir to your house, as well as maintain those reservoirs, build new reservoirs for population growth and so on. So those cost of supply studies are critical in that process. Then they've got to appoint skilled people as the head of the entity to create the single point of accountability.
South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, says the criminal syndicates would not have succeeded in looting funds at the Tembisa Hospital in the Gauteng province if they did not have the backing of government employees. The Health Minister was responding to the Special Investigating Unit's report into corruption and maladministration at the Tembisa Hospital. The SIU says about $15 million have been lost to tender irregularities and fraud at Tembisa Hospital, and this could escalate as investigations continue. Motsoaledi says government must also clean up its own house.
These syndicates we've mentioned here, whether it's Maumela, whether it's Mazibuko, whether it's Ket Matala, whether it's X, even with their infinite wisdom, or thuggery, they could not have achieved what they did without the cooperation and participation of government officials.
China, Zambia and Tanzania have signed a $1.4 billion deal to refurbish the Tanzania-Zambia Railway, a vital route for shipping copper exports from the region. The deal aims to rehabilitate the railway and purchase locomotives, passenger coaches and wagons. Last year, China signed an initial agreement to revive the 50-year-old Tazara Railway, as it is widely known at a time the United States was throwing its financial weight behind a rival transport corridor for minerals called Lobito after an Angolan port. Tazara offers a way to bypass logistics bottlenecks in South Africa that have slowed copper and cobalt exports. President Donald Trump says he will impose a 100% tariff on all films produced overseas that are then sent into the US, repeating a threat made in May that would upend Hollywood's global business model. The step signals Trump's willingness to extend protectionist trade policies into cultural industries, raising uncertainty for studios that depend heavily on cross-border co-productions and international box office revenue. Trump wrote on Truth Social that the U.S. movie-making business has been stolen by other countries. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,483 naira. Botswana 13 pula 20, Kenya 128 shilling 365, and Zambia 23 kwacha 70. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 real 33, Russia 82 rubles 83, India 88 rupees 70, China 7 yuan 12, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rand 27 cents. 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Gold is trading at $3,847 and platinum $1,590 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $67.53 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Huku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Time now for our G20 fact. And did you know South Africa will host the G20 group of nations for the first time? The G20 includes Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union or EU, and the African Union or AU. Founded in 1999, the G20 countries produce 85% of global gross domestic product, or GDP, and are responsible for over 75% of global trade, cover 60% of the world's land area, and are home to nearly two-thirds of the world's population. South Africa is the only member country from Africa in the grouping, and the African Union was admitted in 2023. And that's our G20 fact for this morning, the 30th of September.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
A South African health facility east of Johannesburg, Tembisa Hospital, has lost 2 billion rand, and that's about $116 million, to alleged tender irregularities and fraud, a figure that could rise as investigations continue. The announcement was made by Andim Mutobi, who's the head of the country's Special Investigating Unit, the SIU, which is an independent state agency that probes corruption and recovers stolen public funds. The procurement scandal has been linked to the 2021 assassination of whistleblower Beda Deokaran, who at the time was a senior finance official in her provincial health department. She was shot outside her Johannesburg home. Horisani Sitole reports.
When Gauteng Health senior official and whistleblower Beda Deokaran was fatally shot 4 years ago, she had flagged around 850 million rand in procurement irregularities. Special Investigating Unit Head Ndimo TV says they have identified a number of syndicates in this matter, including the companies linked to attempted murder accused and businessman Vusiket Matlala.
3 of the companies awarded contracts to the value of 13 million are linked to Vusi Muzi Matlala. The Matlala would have come in as part of the syndicate by this Maumela. Maumela's identified assets amount to around 520 million, including luxury vehicles and properties valued at 293 million.
Motibi says they have also found that government officials in both senior and junior levels were also involved. He says one official was paid close to 30 million rand in kickbacks. Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi says government must also clean up its own house.
These syndicates we have mentioned here, whether it's Maumela, whether it's Mazibuko, whether it's Ket Matlala, whether it's X, even with their infinite wisdom or thuggery, they could not have achieved what they did without the cooperation and participation of government officials.
The SIU says some of the assets owned by the Maumela syndicate, which has links to Vusiket Matlala, include the 75 million rand property in Cape Town, a fleet of luxurious cars and a boat. Speaking on behalf of the Diokoran family, Nishan Balton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation has called for immediate action.
I think what the report says is there's a culture issue of corruption in the Department of Health. For a low-level official, or bypass the senior management, or should never have been. So I think that that's a fundamental difference that I would have with such a report, placing the blame on low-level officials only. It can only happen when the entire system above them allows for this. So I think that that's a conclusion that we would want to contest.
Motibi says they have referred their findings to the NPA and the Asset Forfeiture Unit.
All right, so what we're going to try and do in a short while is we're going to get a bit more reaction from South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, who was quite clear actually in that package there that said this kind of thievery could not happen without the cooperation of senior officials in government. And we heard there that one of them actually received as much as 30 million rand in kickbacks from these syndicates. And sadly also what's concerning, we're hearing that a lot of these syndicates are actually associated with senior political figures. And we're going to try to attack that with the health minister. He's angry, as you heard in that package there, but you can imagine the feeling that citizens have across the country, because that 2 billion rand, or 115 million US dollars, could have provided some health care to millions of South Africans. And because of the thieving and the corruption of cartels and senior government officials, we find ourselves in a situation where money is just disappearing. And I suppose one of the big questions that need to be asked is, if this is happening in a local hospital east of Johannesburg, what might be happening in other hospitals in the province, and in fact across the country? How many billions might be being lost at this time through the same kind of corruption? And maybe these cartels may also be involved in these other areas. So we're going to try and unpack this with the Minister of Health in a short while. And it says that there were the SIU, the Special Investigating Unit, and that's a unit that looks into large-scale fraud and tries to recover stolen public funds. They reviewed more than 2,000 procurement bundles, and they uncovered, as they were describing, widespread irregularities, including fake contracts. A lot of front companies were discovered, and pure money laundering. Senior officials, as we said, in the Provincial Health Department of Gauteng, and that's the economic hub of the country, saw these billions literally being siphoned off. And it's just incredible to think that so much money could just disappear through the system. Each year we have auditors that go into these public facilities, audit them, And how is it possible that so much money could disappear? Well, let's get some thoughts now from the country's health minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Dr. Motsoaledi, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and always good to talk to you, but sadly not a great story.
Yes, Peter, definitely not a great story. But at least, it's not something that just disappears like that. People are going to be called to account because they've been caught out.
Minister, the amounts involved are enormous, which probably means very, very senior people are involved, and that perhaps it's something that's been going on for quite a long time now. This must be a big worry for you.
Well, it is a big worry, Peter, but yesterday I was discouraging this notion that whenever monies disappear in government, we conclude that only very big people could be involved. And I was giving an analogy with what I found in Home Affairs, where the very, very junior people who are running the system, who are running procurement systems, are actually raking it by stealing bit by bit until the amounts become very big, because we are sitting and looking at the top only, when at the bottom there can be damage. Clearly, there were 3 syndicates who were involved in Tembisa Hospital. And the question I'm still asking is why Tembisa? Even yesterday, I asked that question, why specifically Tembisa? There were 3 syndicates, but Peter, none of those syndicates, no matter how sophisticated they are, could have been able to achieve what they achieved without the cooperation of all the officials. And 15 of them have already been identified. They are not necessarily senior people, Peter. I really want to emphasize that when people start stealing, it doesn't matter when they are junior or senior. They do cause great damage to a system.
Talking about systems, then there must be a number of failures, because I'm guessing that auditors must come into these facilities at least once a year, if not more. Surely they should have picked up something along the way. And secondly, perhaps address that first.
They are not failures, they are deliberate actions, Peter. You don't call fraud a failure. It is deliberately manipulating something to go in your favor. And these are the people who were supposed to run that system. But I'm sure you are aware that the investigation came because of the late Babita Diogoran. She was part of the system there and she picked it up. So it means there are honest people who can pick these things up and dishonest ones who want to wreck them. And so you are aware that any system anywhere in the world, Peter, is as good as the people who are operating it.
As the national department, are you going to have more oversight on provincial and local facilities because of this kind of thing?
I've been asking for that for ages. That I must confess. Even in the recent budget, I had asked for that. Unfortunately, my treasury does not necessarily think along the same lines as me. Just to give you an example, monies that go to provinces is called equitable share. Is given to a province via a formula called equitable share. And once that money arrives in the province, they've got the right to do whatever they want with it. We don't really have oversight on it. The only people who will pay oversight will be the Auditor General and the provincial legislature, because they've got SCOPA there, SCOPA committees, as you know, and all the audit committees which are in the province. So what I've been asking for from Treasury is that some of these monies must be sent not as equitable share, but as conditional grant through which the minister can have sight. For instance, you are aware that health has been under austerity for a decade. Now we've been fighting that austerity. Eventually, in this recent budget, the Minister of Finance gave us 6.7 billion. I met with the MECs to agree what do we do with that money, which will have a very big impact. And I asked Treasury, please send the money to us as a conditional grant so that it can do particular things which you can see. And Treasury said no. The law says the formula is equitable share. And the minister even mentioned it in Parliament during his budget speech. He said, I'm sending this money, but it's equitable share, which means when it arrives in the province, they've got the right to use it for anything that they believe is important. Not to steal it, but to use it for anything. So if you look at the National Health Insurance, the Act, that's where we've put some of these control measures. But you are aware people have taken us to court. In fact, out of the 7 people who have taken us to court, one of them is saying we want to take over provincial powers in the NHI because we wanted to have control at the central level so that you can sit there as a minister, see everything that's happening even before it happens. Now they say we are usurping provincial powers, is against the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and the matter is in court. So I do agree with you that you need a great oversight. In fact, I've complained that ministers in these concurrent functions in our constitution are given responsibility over something that they don't have authority on. In other words, you give somebody responsibility only, but you don't give them the authority to oversee that responsibility. And that's where the weakness and the problem is. And that's why in the NHI Act, we're trying to correct it.
2 billion rand. What might have that meant in terms of delivery of healthcare? Because citizens are angry, as you can imagine. What have they lost in having so much money stolen?
Well, of course, you lose in terms of everything that the healthcare system must give, in terms of human resources, in terms of commodities, in terms of quite a number of things. The whole country becomes a victim. That's why I said the words which I said yesterday. But at least at the moment, the saving grace is that all the assets have been frozen. They are going to be sold, and part of the money, if not most of it, be brought back, because the assets of what happened with the money have been found out by the SIU, and they are getting freezing orders from the special tribunal, and some of the money will definitely be brought back.
Are you going to look at other provinces, other health facilities, to see if this isn't something that's going on across the country?
Well, that's what we said yesterday. I even asked the SIU that after Gauteng province, I want them to visit 2 more provinces, the KZN and Eastern Cape. They are on our sides, and we want to check if we could find similar things there. So definitely, yes, we want to expand the scope of the investigation.
Minister, we'll leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
That's South Africa's Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, saying that he's concerned, worried, probably shocked as well about what's been going on in one particular hospital east of Johannesburg, Tembisa Hospital, where it's believed so far they've been able to uncover $116 million worth of fraud, corruption, thieving that's taking place, and the investigations are continuing. So that number could rise, and 15 government officials have already been identified, and no doubt more could also fall in the process of this investigation. We'll keep on top of that story for you in the coming weeks and months. So it's 7 o'clock Central African time. Thanks very much indeed for tuning in to Rise and Shine on this Tuesday morning. Have you noticed that the sun is coming out much earlier than ever before? So summer's here, isn't it, Asanda?
It is, and it must be here. We want it to be here. We're happy with that. My name is Asanda Beda. Welcome to the second hour of the show, broadcasting live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. We are Channel Africa, and in this hour, we look at the African journalists from across the continent having gathered gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. This is for a workshop on women, peace and security. It's titled Shaping the Narrative, African Journalists Meeting on Women, Peace and Security. We'll find out about what that is. And then Human Rights Watch has issued warnings that deepening repression in Tanzania threatens the credibility of the October 29 general elections. We'll discuss those stories with analysts and experts. And then, of course, there'll be more coverage of other news happening in and around our continent. First, let's say good morning to Jolani Tulongwepe. She has our news update. And then after her is Sports Headlines by Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. A special court in South Sudan has ruled that it does have the jurisdiction to prosecute suspended Vice President Riek Machar and 7 co-accused who are charged with murder, treason and crimes against humanity. The court dismissed all objections by Machar's legal team regarding its authority, the constitutionality of the proceedings and the claim that he was immune from prosecution. The charges stem from an attack in March by a militia allegedly linked to Machar, which killed 250 soldiers and a general. Since then, he has been under house arrest. The case will continue tomorrow. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has announced he's dissolving the government following youth-led protests over water and power cuts. The United Nations said at least 22 people have been killed and more than 100 injured. Inspired by the so-called Gen Z protests in Kenya and Nepal, the 3 days of demonstrations are the largest the Indian Ocean island has seen in years and the most serious challenge Rajoelina has faced since his re-election in 2023. Police in the capital fired tear gas at thousands of people who returned to the streets yesterday. A Nigerian man who was deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he and 6 others were secretly transported to Togo by Ghanaian authorities. The man said they were abandoned at the Ghana-Togo border without documentation. The BBC's Thomas Nardi has the story.
The Nigerian deportee, who wishes to remain anonymous, said they are stuck in a hotel in Togo where the lack of documentation and language barrier have made life unbearable. The deportees are pursuing separate lawsuits against the Ghanaian government and the Trump administration for rights violations. The U.S. government's third-party deportation policy has faced criticism, with several countries pushing back against the strategy.
Crime intelligence head in South Africa, General Dumisani Khumalo, says they have identified 5 individuals who are part of a cartel that has allegedly penetrated the political sphere. The Big Five cartel, as he terms it, is alleged to have syndicates operating under it. He says the cartel is operating throughout the country with its headquarters in Gauteng. Khumalo, who is testifying before the Madlanga Commission, says prominent figures such as Vusumuzi Matlala and Katiso Katie Molefe have been identified as members of the Big Five cartel.
The Big Five has already penetrated the political sphere, and there are documented cases of high-profile connections in the political arena. Senior politicians alleged to be complicit and or willfully blind to the syndicate operations.
US President Donald Trump has declared that peace in the Middle East is very close as he presented a new plan to end the war in Gaza in the presence of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu said that he has supported the scheme, with both men saying Hamas must also do so or Israel would finish its offensive. Hamas says it's studying the plan. The BBC's Sarah Smith has the details.
It is proposed that Israel would withdraw its forces from Gaza gradually. All the hostages are to be returned within 72 hours before the release of almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. A further withdrawal would happen once an international stabilisation force was in place. Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and turn over their weapons would be granted an amnesty. Others would be allowed to leave the territory. This all hinges on securing the agreement of Hamas, which was not involved in any of the negotiations. If the plan is rejected, Mr. Trump said, Israel would have his full backing to finish the job of destroying the threat from Hamas.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Amajita fall to France in the Under-20 World Cup opener in Chile, and Roland Garros to keep line judges for 2026 tournament. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
We start this hour in South Africa, where this startling new testimony has linked the African National Congress, the ANC, that's the country's oldest and largest political party, to a powerful criminal network known as the Big Five. Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo, who's the head of police crime intelligence, told the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry that WhatsApp messages reveal how drug money from alleged cartel boss Vusimuzi Matlala was used to fund ANC delegates. The Madlanga Commission is a high-level judicial inquiry established by President Cyril Ramaphosa to investigate claims of corruption, organized crime and political interference within state institutions. Its hearings have become a focal point for uncovering how criminal syndicates may influence both politics and law enforcement in South Africa. Khumalo's testimony also suggested that the cartels have infiltrated the police service at senior levels, raising deep concern about the integrity of South Africa's security apparatus. Demakatso Lishoro reports.
The Madlanga Commission, sitting at the country's administrative hub, Pretoria, was shown WhatsApp text messages taken from the phone of alleged cartel leader Vusimuzi Matlala after he was arrested. These WhatsApp texts paint a picture of how criminal cartels' drug money flows from chats straight into the corridors of power. Giving his evidence on Monday, the police crime intelligence boss, Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo, linked the country's long-ruling party, the ANC delegates, to money that investigators say may have been channeled through state contracts.
Mr. Matlala or one of his employees makes payments to Mr. Mohozi directly, sometimes for expenses related to the African National Congress events, and in particular for the benefit of delegates of such event who are apparently linked to the Minister Mkhunu through the Chief of Staff, Mr. Nkabinde, in the office of the Minister. And number two, in return, Mr. Mohozi uses his influence within the SAPS and the Ministry to manipulate SAPS processes so as to frustrate criminal investigations into Mr. Vusimuzi Matlala.
At the center of it all is the Big Five cartel. Khumalo stated was no ordinary gang, but similar to a highly structured syndicate operating across borders with political protection.
The currently identified cartel is having a structure as reflected, with the main commodity being drugs, and then there are other illicit activities. This is an ongoing project investigation from the identification of the Big Five, the progress made. Those that are mentioned, reflected there in their boxes or positions, they've already been addressed, being a Mr. Katiso Mulifi, as well as a Mr. Vusimuzi Matlala, and then the other three are still being addressed.
Despite this web of influence, Khumalo, who's heavily guarded by police in private clothing, together with his team of investigators, the Political Killings Task Team, have found a way to fight back. This fight includes an investigative model that flips investigations on their heads. Instead of detectives leading investigations, analysts now take the driver's seat. It's called the analysis-led approach based on 5 key pillars.
We refer to it as tried and tested. It is the analysis-led investigation using organized crime approach. The analysis-led approach was basically meant to bring different expertise from within SAPS to work in a coordinated fashion. Our approach was, let us get our house in order first before we invite other stakeholders.
The commission heard that as the noose began to tighten around Matlala's neck, a comrade of the police minister and a facilitator of payments from criminals to ANC members, Brown Mokhotsi, sought to have the task team disbanded.
Mr. Mokhotsi has pursued the disestablishment of the Political Killings Task Team. Mr. Mokhotsi purports to have been operating in this regard with the support of the Minister of Police, as well as the Chief of Staff in the Minister of Police, Mr. Nkabinde, and Lieutenant General Sbiya, the Deputy National Commissioner in the SAPS.
Not only have criminal cartels infiltrated politicians, but the police themselves, according to Khumalo. Senior officers, including the police's second highest ranking officer, General Shadrack Sibiya, is among those. On Monday, another senior police officer was named, Major General Lesecha Senona, provincial head of the Police Directorate for Priority Crimes Investigation. The Hawks in KwaZulu-Natal is an example of how cartels gain protection from within their police. His son is alleged to have various business interests with Matlala. Khumalo warned that this infiltration gives criminal networks inside knowledge, sabotages operations, and erodes public trust.
In parallel, Major General Sinona pursues similar objectives with Mr. Mokhotsi and leaks confidential SAPS documents to Mr. Matlala. Major General Sinona's association with Mr. Matlala appears to be linked to a commercial venture between Mr. Matlala and Mr. Tato Sinona, his son.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro in Pretoria.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Yo, listen up. Channel Africa is taking the digital game higher.
Check it out.
We are taking our digital platforms to the next level. For you, our loyal listeners.
You know where we at, right?
New website, a fresh new app, and they're on fire. Anytime, anywhere listening, Channel Africa brings the African sound to you.
It's the bomb, yo.
Stay locked. The future is crystal clear with us. Your new way to experience Channel Africa is almost here. Africa, stand tall and get ready. This September, Channel Africa celebrates Heritage Month, a time to honor the stories, the rhythms, and the languages that make us who we are. Whether you're in Lagos or the shores of Zanzibar to the mountains of Lesotho or the markets of Dakar, we are united in diversity.
Najivunia kuwa Mwafrika.
Kukondolera Afrika ndiye wake.
Proudly African and fabulous.
Let us preserve our languages. Let's embrace our uniqueness. Let's embrace our cultures and celebrate the beauty of our continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Now, let's move and shift our attention to East Africa. And we begin by looking at something that's happening in Tanzania, with a country which is approaching its general elections on October the 29th, under what Human Rights Watch describes as an increasingly repressive environment in its latest report. Human Rights Watch details a pattern of media crackdowns, forced article removals, arrests of opposition figures, and the silencing of civil society voices, all raising serious doubts about whether the elections will be free, fair, or even credible. Well, to help us unpack these developments, we're now joined by Nomatansaga Masiko Mpaka, who's Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
In broad terms, your report doesn't paint a good picture for Tanzania. Take us through the most concerning aspects of the things that you found.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely correct. I mean, I think the picture for Tanzania in the lead up to the elections that are scheduled for October 29th this year, they paint a pretty bleak picture. And I think for us as Human Rights Watch, even, deciding to embark on this research was because we had been observing and also hearing from local NGOs on the ground about, the authorities clamping down on the activities of the media, those who are perceived to be government critics, political opposition, and restrictive legislation and policies, the restrictions and blocking of opposition parties, the use of force, the arbitrary arrests, abductions, disappearances, killings, torture and ill treatment. So really, these were the things that were coming out, on the ground. And I think maybe what also rang the alarms for us was when, local NGOs started documenting also these cases. And when Boniface and Agatha, Kenyan and Ugandan activists were abducted and tortured, we realized that I think there's a lot happening in the domestic front in Tanzania in the lead up to elections, and there was a need for us to conduct a more comprehensive report on the human rights concerns. And from the conversations that we had, sort of the more preliminary conversations we had as we're, trying to get our ducks in a row for the research, we realized that a lot of what happens in Tanzania, not only is it done and said in Kiswahili, but the reporting is also in Kiswahili. So often the English-speaking world would not know what is happening because it's written in Kenya. Some of the, rhetoric is in is in Kiswahili as well. That was kind of the general motivation for us to conduct this research. And really, we spoke to over 20 activists, political actors. We spoke with members of the media, religious leaders as well, who've been vocal about the political climate in the country, the abductions that are happening, the disappearances that are happening, and what they were experiencing as a result of speaking out. And a lot of them are living in a perpetual state of fear, because anybody who speaks out about, against the government is heavily penalized, and their lives are threatened.
What are people telling you on the ground there in terms of, is this an escalation in human rights abuses? It's hard to imagine that this is the Tanzania of Julius Nyerere and maybe even Jakaya Kikwete.
Absolutely. I think, things, I suppose with Magufuli passing away, due to COVID, there was a lot of renewed hope, I think, in the country. with Mama Samia, taking on the presidency. And, she came as well with what appeared to be, commitment to reforms and reconciliation and, all the good things. But that was just, based on the evidence before us, there was nothing of that happened. And it was more of a continuation. And now, as we're leading up to the elections, as they're trying to consolidate power, we're seeing that there is actually an escalation of the violence from the Magufuli era. And I think really what we'd like to see really is for the Electoral Commission to be independent. And I think a lot of the media practitioners in the country, people such as yourself, are honestly self-censoring. They stopped from doing their work. They're threatened. Just recently, JAMA Forums was taken off. People who are doing work on social media. So it's not just mainstream media, it's social media and all kinds of alternative forms of media that are being restricted. And of course, access to information is then, of course, curtailed, and just general media freedoms being threatened in the country.
The Electoral Commission, what kind of evidence is coming forward that perhaps their independence is not guaranteed?
Well, first of all, despite its name, because it's called the Independent National Electoral Commission, but despite its name, those who are appointed, particularly the president, they're appointed by the president of the country. So you cannot have somebody who's meant to be objective in the management of elections be appointed by the president. And of course, and then the decisions that are made then cannot be challenged within the court. You find, we know, for example, with the Chadema leader as well, who's now been suspended from participating in the elections and is facing the treason trial and the rest of it. But really, these are all issues that the Independent National Electoral Commission should be able to manage in a way that is fair to ensure that the elections are free and fair. So I think we want, for sure, and this is what's coming out as well from the ground, is that for the Independent National Electoral Commission to actually be true to its word and be independent, because what we've seen is that there have been some changes which have been cosmetic in terms of the renaming of the commission, but in terms of its substantive, any substantive changes, things remain the same. They basically do the government's bidding.
What are you hearing from ordinary citizens? Are they living in fear? I mean, one can understand journalists being targeted, activists being targeted. Sometimes that's part of the political game. What about citizens? Are they fearful given what they're seeing?
I mean, and this was the question for me as I began this research as well, because I said to myself, well, we see what the political parties are saying. We see what the civil society organizations are saying. But is what they are saying also sort of representative of what the citizens are saying as well? And I think and this was like a sort of recurring question within the research as well. And from what I understood is that there is certainly a restlessness within just general society. There is, a restlessness in terms of people's inability to speak out and just their fundamental civil and political rights being infringed upon. And of course, there's also the socioeconomic and the connections there. But I think for sure, and when Chadema talks about no reforms, no elections, they were telling us as Human Rights Watch that actually that slogan actually came from the ground. It wasn't a top-down slogan. It is a slogan that came from below. So people do want change. They do want sort of more immediate reforms in terms of people being able to participate in the elections free and fairly, but also more longer-term constitutional reforms. So for sure, these are not just, sentiments of the elite, of those we're speaking to, but they are also sentiments that come from below.
So some defenders of these measures argue that they're necessary to preserve stability, order and national security. Is there anything that opposition figures, journalists that have written about that could be deemed problematic enough for the country to take such drastic measures?
Absolutely not. It's an unequivocal no. As an organization that, focuses on human rights, for us, human rights are, they're so fundamental, and there's absolutely nothing that a human being could say or do that would then, make it okay for them to be arbitrarily arrested, to be abducted, to be disappeared, to be killed, to be tortured. Those freedoms should be protected at all costs. And I think there is a need for the government to engage with its people, and for it to engage with civil society, because at this point it seems to be quite an adversarial sort of relationship. I think, the dialogue is important to happen so that somehow they meet each other in the middle. But ultimately, the human rights need to be protected at all costs. For us, that is a non-negotiable, because people are, incredibly repressed. People are living in fear. In one of the interviews, one of the gentlemen I spoke to talked about how, just like how normal things like being able to approach a woman and ask a woman out. He was like, as an activist, we are so fearful because people are planted, people are there to poison us, people are there to do all kinds of things. So basic things like approaching a woman, a beautiful woman, and say, hey, I like you, would you like to go out for a coffee? You're in constant fear. He was saying just moving around. He was like, I don't move around alone, for example. I always have to have somebody with me in case I'm abducted, or receive some kind of arrest from the police. So the moment is very tense as we're leading up to the elections. And I think we need to have the government listen to its people ahead of the elections, and certainly even beyond the elections.
Have you engaged the authorities at all at any level with regards what you found, and did they respond?
Yeah, so we did write a letter to the authorities, alerting them of this research and some of our findings. Unfortunately, we've not heard from them. But I mean, this is for us ongoing work. And so even though we may not have heard from them now, because we know that it's a pretty busy time, but I hope that they do eventually respond, and that we can have some kind of engagement with them around, some of our recommendations and just our findings, and to hear their side of the story as well.
How widespread are these issues? Is this right across the country, or mainly the bigger cities?
No, it's something that's certainly widespread, but of course, the larger cities would be more affected, where you'd find a lot of the more, political activism. But it's something that's relatively well spread. I think if wherever you're located, if you're speaking out, if you're posting on social media, if you're doing anything that they would disagree with, any kind of dissent, you would be affected. But for sure, the bigger cities would be disproportionately affected.
From what you've seen so far, can the elections be credible at all?
If things remain the way they are, it's difficult to say that they would be credible, free and fair. And, it's less than a month before elections. So I think, there is that kind of contestation of what is possible in light of the time constraints, and what is desirable as well, coming from civil society. But I'm hoping that, with some of the conversations, that if the government does eventually respond, and other, actors that are involved, because I understand we're not the only role players that are speaking out against what's happening. There are a lot of conversations that are happening in closed doors. I'm hoping that, the government will be able to heed the calls of the people, the ordinary people, the citizens, the civil society, and anybody who's speaking out about what is just, about what is right, and that maybe there could be some minimal reforms leading up to elections to ensure that they're actually free and credible, and that everybody participates in a free and fair way. Because we've heard incidences, for instance, in Zanzibar, where people are struggling to access ID cards, which they would then need to participate in the elections, as it is in any other country, right, where you need to have your ID card when you're going out to vote. But now, if you're restricting access for people to get those ID cards, that's a deliberate attempt to ensure that those people's voices are not heard in the elections. And so there's a lot happening in the country beyond just the physical violence that you're seeing, but also just deliberate, attempts to stop certain individuals from actually participating in the elections by preventing them from getting ID cards.
All right, and perhaps finally, what are Human Rights Watch's core recommendations? What must Tanzania's government do, and maybe even regional bodies and partners, even the UN, do in response?
Well, we want the Independent National Electoral Commission to be independent and be true to its word. We need the stop. We need to close the tap on the violence, the arrests, the abductions, the disappearances, the killings, the torture, the ill treatment. That needs to stop. I think that tap needs to close because it's quite intense. But also we want to ensure that these elections are free and fair, that everybody is able to participate, both the political actors who are part of the election, but also those who are coming in to vote. So that needs to happen. I think there's a role for sure that, the African Commission can play in terms of also speaking out. And we often don't see that happening as often as we'd like. But I think there's a role that the African Commission, the East African Commission, could be playing. And interestingly, some of the conversations that we've had, with some of the interviewees as well, saying that we need people to write. So people like yourselves who are in the media, the SABC and others, to really start spotlighting what is happening. Because again, violations are happening in Kiswahili. The mainstream media does not know what's happening. So we need everybody needs to come to the party.
And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you so much indeed for highlighting these troubling issues in East Africa, Tanzania in particular. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
That's Nomatam Sangla, who's Masiko Mpaka, who's an Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch, talking to us about the situation in Tanzania, the abuses taking place ahead of elections in the country. It's time now for your news headlines, as we say good morning once again to Dwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, a special court in South Sudan has ruled that it does have jurisdiction to prosecute suspended Vice President Riek Machar and 7 co-accused who are charged with murder, treason and crimes against humanity. A Nigerian man who was deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he and 6 others were secretly transported to Togo by Ghanaian authorities. And finally, the US State Department has put Brazil and South Africa on a human trafficking watch list. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Let's check in with the world of sports now as we say good morning to Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good morning, Asanda. We start off with football news. Amajita put up a fighting performance but were undone by the precision of group heavyweights France in a 2-1 defeat to the South Africans in their 2025 FIFA Under-20 World Cup opener on Monday. Anthony Beaumont put France ahead in the 25th minute at Estadio El Teniet in Rancagua in the Group E in Chile. Jody Anshin pulled one back from the spot in the 33rd minute. France edged the second half, though star forward Lucas Michael's late winner came after 2 quick, strong chances to the South Africans. Amajida are expected to face off with New Caledonia on the 3rd of October. Some more news in football. Sports Minister Gayton McKenzie has reacted to FIFA's ruling to deduct 3 points from Bafana Bafana in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers and the fine of about $14,000 for fielding an ineligible player, Tebogo Mokoena, in the match against Lesotho in March. He says the developments are deeply regrettable and has brought embarrassment to the nation and the game of football. He acknowledges that this situation has brought South Africa into disrepute and his department will launch a full investigation into the incompetence that led to this sanction. And Athletics South Africa is optimistic that the forthcoming Northern Cape government and with the different stakeholders have invested millions into the inaugural Diamond Endurance Kimberley Marathon. It is the first of its kind in the province and will be held in November, where about 2,000 runners are expected to take part. The winner of the marathon will walk away with the $12,000. Premier Zamani Soul says this will not only attract elite runners but will also boost the province's economy.
We can't allow the economy of this town to be subdued and die on our watch. So we'll have to do all these strategic interventions in order to ensure that the economy of this town keep on growing. With the first quarter and the second quarter of this year, the economy grew by 1.2%, which was the highest in the province, which is even the highest, it could be the highest in the country, because the average growth of the economy of South Africa is 0.7%. And Kimberley's economic growth was standing at 1.2%. And we need to build on that. We need to optimize the economic potential of this town.
Roland Garros will continue to use line judges for next year's event. The French Tennis Federation says the clay court major is the only Grand Slam tournament not to use automated line calling after Wimbledon joined the Australian and US Open earlier this year in ditching the line judges. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutufanya wote ndio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV, ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Right, it's time to find out what's happening in the world of business. Good morning once again, Tabiso Lihuko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. A German power utility, RWE, says it had withdrawn from Namibia's $10 billion green ammonia project, a blow to the southern African nation's ambition to become a major hydrogen hub. The pullback is the latest example of companies reconsidering investments in a nascent technology that is expensive to develop. RWE signed a preliminary non-binding memorandum of understanding with Hyphen in 2022 to take around 300,000 tons a year of ammonia, a compound used mostly to make a fertilizer, from 2027. The South African National Treasury has implemented a 6-year performance-linked $3 billion incentive grant toward the delivery of trading services reforms. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says a notable underinvestment in trading services, namely water, sanitation and electricity in various metros, calls for urgent action by both national and local government. Addressing metropolitan municipality officials in Pretoria, Godongwana says an incentive-based grant for trading services will create accountability and predictability in grant allocation to the metros.
You know, at the moment, the issue of water and electricity is not properly managed in municipalities. So we've targeted the big one for starters because they service a bigger community, that to help them restructure how those services are done.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister, Asha Sorapin, says metros must meet a set of minimum planning and performance requirements before trading services reform can be applied. These include delivering a turnaround business plan, financial transparency, and the appointment of a trading services chief executive. The Deputy Minister was speaking on the sidelines of the National Treasury's Metro Trading Services Reforms Engagement session in Pretoria. Sarapin says improvement in water, sanitation and electricity services is critical for attracting investments into the cities.
The first is that they had to create a performance improvement plan. The performance improvement plan had to be approved by the council. Secondly, they've got to then decide on the model of reform, and we gave them three options. Most have opted to create a business unit, which must have its own balance sheets, must have its own cost of supply study, so that they actually understand what does it cost them to get water from the water board to the reservoir to your house, as well as maintain those reservoirs, build new reservoirs for population growth and so on. So those cost of supply studies are critical in that process. Then they've got to appoint skilled people as the head of the entity to create the single point of accountability.
The Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mining Development in Equatorial Guinea, Antonio Oburu Ondo, says the country will open a new oil and gas licensing round in April to boost exploration and counter dwindling oil output. Ondo says the licensing round will be launched in the second quarter of 2026, right after the details of timelines, application procedures and further information will be available. Chandugo Ligege reports.
Opening in April and running until November, the licensing round offers 24 blocks, 2 of which are onshore and the rest offshore. Equatorial Guinea is a member of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and currently has 6 producing fields run by companies. The country has produced 241,000 barrels of oil per day at its peak in 2010, but output has since fallen to 55,000 barrels per day in 2023.
Oil prices fell as another anticipated production increase by OPEC Plus and the resumption of oil exports from Iraq's Kurdistan region via Turkey reinforced the outlook for a looming supply surplus. Brent crude futures for November delivery expiring on Tuesday fell 54 US cents or 0.8% to $67.43 a barrel. The more active contract for December was down 53 cents or 0.8% at $66.56 per barrel. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,483 naira. Botswana 13 pula 20, Kenya 128 shilling 365, and Zambia 23 kwacha 70. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 rubles 33. Russia 82 rubles 83, India 88 rupees 70, China 7 yuan 12, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rand 27 cents. 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Gold is trading at $3,847 and platinum $1,590 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $67.53 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Botswana is intensifying efforts to diversify its economy as steep U.S. tariffs continue to weigh on the competitiveness of its exports. Although the levies were lowered in August to between 10 and 15% after diplomatic talks, the country's main chamber of commerce warns they remain high enough to threaten sales and jobs. Business Botswana CEO Norman Moliele says the trade dispute is a turning point, cautioning that blocked exports could cost employment, while stressing that Botswana is already looking to new partners.
On the tariffs that remain high, I'm sure you'll agree with me that the tariffs that were set in by the US government on the whole world, actually, because it was not only Botswana that was affected, came as a shock to everyone. However, we took it in our stride as a country and proceeded to negotiate, as has been advised by the American government itself to say countries should come and negotiate on a one-on-one basis. This is a new era that we are going into. Nobody had expected that this kind of a thing will happen. So we are hoping that with the continued negotiations, these tariffs will be reduced to manageable levels, or even removed completely, because as a country, we do have good relations with our American friends, and we believe that something positive will come out of the continued negotiations, which we are aware, and we do make our input through our sector that is, every sector that is affected by the tariffs, including the diamond sector.
You have mentioned exploring new markets such as China and leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, which sectors or products do you see as Botswana's strongest contenders for diversification and, of course, expansion into these markets?
On exploring new markets, there are several products that Botswana is producing which can go to different markets. Besides the diamond itself, the jewelry sector, can emerge out of this and grow into a formidable sector, and we export our jewelry to markets like China, India, and of course into the rest of Africa through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We also have a budding automotive parts manufacturing sector. We are manufacturing harnesses to supply the motor industry in South Africa. These are products that can be extended to other markets. They are part of a value chain. That can open up avenues in different countries which are in the motor industry as well. We know countries like Ghana, countries like Nigeria, Kenya have gone into manufacturing or assembly of vehicles. So negotiations with those under the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement should end up with such products going into the production of motor vehicles in those countries. And it's not only that, our beef as well is finding markets and is getting interest in the Far East, particularly in China, where they've started making arrangements or preparations to export beef to China.
Beyond finding alternative export destinations, now what structural reforms or policy shifts do you believe are most urgent to make your country's economy more resilient to external shocks like trade disputes?
As has always been said and recognized, crises are always an opportunity to look at reforms and do reforms that otherwise would not have been done if things were still moving smoothly. Like I said earlier on, it's a new era we've entered into. It's an era that we've got to take in our stride. It's an era that we should see opportunity rather than, crying over the challenges that have been brought about by all these changes. Therefore, we've recently seen a bold move by our government, and it's an excellent move.
That was Business Botswana CEO Norman Muliele speaking to our economics reporter Innocent Samosa.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, has welcomed news that lenacapavir, a twice-yearly injectable for HIV prevention, will be available at $40 per year from 2027 in 120 countries. But MSF warns that many high-burden countries are excluded, leaving millions at risk. Joining us to discuss the challenges and the urgent need for equitable access is Carlota Baptista da Silva, MSF's HIV/HCV Access Advocacy Manager. Carlota, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Our pleasure. Please, first of all, explain to us how exactly this rollout will work. What is known about this drug, lenacapavir?
Well, we know that lenacapavir is a twice-yearly injectable drug that actually prevents the transmission of HIV at an efficacy of 96 to 100%, which is quite transformative. So we do welcome very much this announcement because it's a step forward, setting the price at $40 starting in 2027 marks really progress around affordability and access. But while we see this as progress, we are also concerned. First, the timeline is slow. So 2027 is still 2 years away, and every year of delay means thousands of new infections could be prevented. And second, the coverage is incomplete. So Gilead, the pharma company producing LAN, is only allowing licensing in specific countries. So it does allow generic production in 6 companies from 2027 onwards, and that's where the price has now been set up of $40. This is good news, but many countries with substantial HIV burden are excluded from this agreement. And in fact, about 1 in 4 new infections globally occur outside the countries covered. So yes, this is progress, but it leaves many people behind.
So which are the regions that are most affected as we talk about many countries with high HIV rates that will be excluded?
Basically, many countries with the highest burden of HIV are part of the license, but there are countries left out, such as in Latin America, such as Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Peru, which have HIV concentrated epidemics. And many of the countries which are outside the region, also some in Africa, they face concentrated HIV epidemics. And these countries, for example, in Latin America, are also countries where the communities volunteer to participate in the clinical trials that proved lenacapavir effectiveness. So it's simply unethical that communities that contributed to the science may now be excluded from affordable access. And beyond fairness and ethics, it's also a public health problem, because if we exclude countries where epidemics are still growing, means that we are leaving millions at risk and weakening the global fight against HIV, right? Because if we talk about 25% or a quarter of the new infections are happening outside the territories that are including in this agreement, it's not a marginal issue, it's a major gap. So every preventable infection that occurs because of this exclusion adds unnecessary costs, suffering, and preventable HIV infection.
Could the $40 price still be a barrier? No, you mentioned that it's making this drug more affordable. And what could be needed then to make it truly affordable if there are gaps on that part?
I think the $40 price is really a step forward, affordability. The drug is available in the US for thousands of dollars per person per year. So $40 per person per year is quite a step forward. The bigger problem is really the limitations in scope and ambition. So a fair price only matters if it's paired with broad licensing, clear transparency, and the political will to deliver the medication. So what's most urgent is expanding the license to all low and middle income countries, ensuring the price is public and consistent, and rolling out lenacapavir at scale that actually meets the global need. So without this, we risk having a headline figure, just $40, that looks good on paper, but fails to translate into real access for the people who need it most.
So who can have this drug? Who can be able to access it? Can pregnant women use it? Can children use it? And over what period of time does it kick in one's body in terms of preventing the onset of HIV?
So basically, lenacapavir is going to be rolled out in 9 early adopter countries, all in Africa, including South Africa. So this is really good news. The population has been pregnant and breastfeeding women, adolescents, girl, and young women, and we hope that it will also include the most at-risk population, which are the key population, right? Which means sex workers, men who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, transgender people. So currently, there has been an agreement announced earlier between PEPFAR, the Pharma, Gilead, and Global Fund. And their plan is to reach about 2 million people in 12 countries in 3 years. On the surface, that might sound like a big number, and it's good news, but we see that different modeling, such as UNAIDS modeling, show that under such a limited approach, only 2 million people, only a small fraction of prevention with HIV will be avoided, around 50,000, compared to the millions that could be prevented if access were broader or faster. So also, we are a bit concerned about the way the plan is designed. For example, PEPFAR, the US government fund, has said that its initial focus will be mainly on pregnant and breastfeeding women. Of course, this is an important group that deserves protection. But the danger is that this narrow focus risks deprioritizing other populations, such as key populations. So sex workers, men have sex with men, people who inject drugs, transgender people. And yet it is precisely in these communities where long-acting PrEP could have the greatest impacts. Also, because people are more at risk of HIV, but due to all the barriers around, right? You know, that stigma, criminalization, and the barriers to access healthcare and daily pill make this make it prevention particularly difficult. So this is why MSF insists that donors and governments must do more. They need to commit the financial resources, the political will, and the focus on equity that can make this a game changer. Otherwise, we might miss a critical opportunity to turn the tide of the epidemic.
How can licensing be expanded on this drug and transparency ensured, especially on the part of Gilead Sciences?
Well, first of all, Gilead should take should expand the license to cover all low and middle income countries. We know that HIV does not respect borders, and neither should access to prevention. We need also to expand to those countries with focus and concentrated HIV epidemic, where the infections are growing faster. Second, Gilead needs to make pricing transparent, because until 2027, there's no generics available, right? So right now, too much is happening behind closed doors. Government, global health donors are negotiating without full visibility, and that actually weakens accountability. So everyone should know the access price, the terms of the agreements, and the volume commitments. And third, we should all support ambitious rollout, right? So governments, donors, that means that governments need to prepare the supply chains. They need to ensure regulatory approval processes move quickly, make sure countries can start implementation as soon as possible. There are information that this drug will be available in December or January 2026, which is great, but countries, donors, and the pharma industry need to do more. So at present, Gilead's strategy still prioritizes profit over epidemic control, and MSF position is clear. Lenacapavir is a breakthrough in HIV prevention, and it must not be treated as a luxury good. The focus should be on saving lives and reducing new infections, not on maximizing revenue.
What message then would you send to communities, to policymakers, and to donors?
Well, I guess that we need to think that to truly end the HIV epidemic, lenacapavir must reach everyone who needs it, especially those most vulnerable, who are in fact the most excluded. So as mentioned, current plans have restrictive licensing, have opaque pricing, have timid targets who risk failing to make a real dent in global infection rates. So once again, the science is clear, the demand is urgent. We have the tools to prevent millions of new HIV infections, but only if we act with transparency, ambitions, and fairness. So this is really once and in a generation chance to change the course of the epidemic. We cannot leave people behind. No one should be excluded. So we hope that this will be a collective effort from everyone.
Carlota, thank you so much for your time. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a good morning.
You
Bye.
too. Carlota Baptista da Silva, HIV and HCV Access Advocacy Manager at Doctors Without Borders, there, talking to us about developments as far as HIV prevention is concerned. A twice-yearly injectable drug, lenacapavir, is going to be available from the year 2027 in about 120 countries. Should I throw forward? It's 8 o'clock Central African time as we're busy discussing who's doing what in studio. Welcome to the third and final hour of Rise and Shine. We're broadcasting live from South Africa in Johannesburg. We are Channel Africa. And from the African perspective, we bring you news, current affairs, as well as lifestyle programs. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for tuning in. As Asanda was saying, this is the last hour of today's edition of Rise and Shine. And elections are on my mind today. Yeah, we're going to be going to Seychelles, where Patrick Hermani secured 48.8% of the vote, whilst incumbent Wavel Ramkalwan trailed behind by 46.4%, which means there's a runoff in the elections in Seychelles. We'll unpack the political story in Seychelles. What does this mean? And we'll be talking to an international relations expert from the University of Johannesburg about that. That's all coming up after the news, as we say good morning once again to Dwelani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has announced he's dissolving the government following youth-led protests over water and power cuts. The United Nations said at least 22 people have been killed and more than 100 injured. Inspired by the so-called Gen Z protests in Kenya and Nepal, the 3 days of demonstrations are the largest the Indian Ocean island has seen in years and the most serious challenge Rajoelina has faced since his re-election in 2023. Police in the capital fired tear gas at thousands of people who returned to the streets yesterday. A special court in South Sudan has ruled that it does have the jurisdiction to prosecute suspended Vice President Riek Machar and 7 co-accused who are charged with murder, treason and crimes against humanity. The court dismissed all objections by Machar's legal team regarding its authority, the constitutionality of the proceedings and the claim that he was immune from prosecution. The charges stem from an attack in March by a militia allegedly linked to Machar, which killed 250 soldiers and a general. Since then, he has been under house arrest. The case will continue tomorrow. A Nigerian man who was deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he and 6 others were secretly transported to Togo by Ghanaian authorities. The man said they were abandoned at the Ghana-Togo border without documentation. The BBC's Thomas Nadi has the story.
The Nigerian deportee, who wishes to remain anonymous, said they are stuck in a hotel in Togo where the lack of documentation and language barrier have made life unbearable. The deportees are pursuing separate lawsuits against the Ghanaian government and the Trump administration for rights violations. The U.S. government's deportation policy has faced criticism, with several countries pushing back against the strategy.
Crime intelligence head in South Africa, General Dumisani Khumalo, says they have identified 5 individuals who are part of a cartel that has allegedly penetrated the political sphere. The Big Five cartel, as he terms it, is alleged to have syndicates operating under it. He says the cartel is operating throughout the country with its headquarters in Gauteng. Khumalo, who is testifying before the Madlanga Commission, says prominent figures such as Vusumuzi Kat Matlala and Katiso KT Molefe have been identified as members of the Big Five cartel.
The Big Five has already penetrated the political sphere, and there are documented cases of high-profile connections in the political arena, senior politicians alleged to be complicit and or willfully blind to the syndicate operations.
The U.S. State Department has put Brazil and South Africa on a human trafficking watch list. In a statement, the Trump administration cited what it says are failures of both countries to demonstrate progress on the issue amid heightened tensions between their governments and the U.S. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines this hour, SAFA is expected to appeal Bafana Bafana's docked points. And Argentina hit by injury crisis as Felipe Contempomi hails brilliant Feinberg Mgomezulu. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Good morning starts here. Rise and shine on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
So, 2 candidates, including Barrister Akere Muna, widely seen as representing the voices of minority Anglophones in Cameroon, French-speaking majority nation, have withdrawn from the country's presidential race. They say they are joining Bello Buba, a former close ally of President Paul Biya, who resigned to challenge the long-serving leader in Cameroon's October 12 presidential elections. Moki Edwin Kinzeka reports from Yaoundé, Cameroon, that many other opposition candidates are still expected to decline to increase chances of toppling Biya's 43-year-old rule.
Akere Muna, candidate of opposition Universe Party, told several hundred of his supporters in Cameroon's economic capital Douala that because he is very sure that a united opposition has more chances of defeating Cameroon's long-serving leader Paul Biya in the Central African States' October 12 presidential election, he has decided to withdraw and support another opposition candidate, Bello Buba Maigari. The lawyer, known for his strong crusade against corruption and former Cameroon Bar Council president, called on his supporters to rally behind Bello Buba, stressing that national unity and political pragmatism demand a common front. Queen Jokem, communications officer for presidential candidate Akere Muna, told Channel Africa why the opposition candidate decided to withdraw and support Bello.
The decision to stand by Bello Buba Maigari for the October 12, 2025 presidential elections is a decision that was very carefully made. After several consultation meetings and the political agendas studied, a common proposal has been drafted for the liberation and for the good of the entire Cameroonian people. Bello is the one that has been decided to stand as the flag bearer of the coalition.
Jokem calls on English-speaking Cameroonians who consider Akere as representing their voices in the French-speaking majority country not to be discouraged. She says Bello will take into consideration the plight of Anglophones who complain of marginalization if voted.
Yes, I agree with you that most of our Anglophone brothers and other Cameroonians, of course, feel disappointed because they know that Barrister Akere Muna is the right person to bring the change that we have long sought for in Cameroon. However, let me clarify here that being the flag bearer doesn't mean that the work of liberation has been abandoned into your hands alone. It is a teamwork. That is why we call it a coalition. And Barrister Akeremuna simply responded to the cry, to the call, to the clarion call of the Cameroonian people who had asked for over 10 months today. Why can opposition not come together and form a strong united force? What is most important is not just sitting up there. What is most important is that Cameroonians get the liberation that they've long sought for.
Akeremuna was the second candidate to withdraw from the race and declare his support for Bello Buba. The first was Ateki Seta Caxton of the Liberal Alliance Party, who is also from the English-speaking minority part of the French-speaking majority Cameroon. Ateki Seta Caxton told his supporters on Saturday when campaigns were launched that his decision was guided by the need to see the opposition increase its chances of toppling Biya's 43-year-old rule. With two Anglophone figures stepping down, Bello Buba Maigari, a former close collaborator of Biya, who resigned from his ministerial post to challenge the 92-year-old ruler, sees a notable boost and gives him a slight upper hand against some of the candidates. But the opposition is yet to come to a consensus over a consensual candidate. Tumaino Ndamjoya is the lone female candidate in the race. She says the opposition should give chances to a woman and calls for the strict independence of the elections management body, free from what he calls Biya's influence.
We had, since February 2025, reminded national and international opinion of the CDU candidate for the presidential election as provided for in our statutes. By embarking on this path, the CDU is taking its responsibilities in hand, not only to conquer power, but also and above all to call for a change in the regime in power for 43 years through a peaceful and democratic alternation. For Cameroon Democratic Union, voting is the first right and the first civic duty. Voting is a fundamental act in a democracy where power belongs to people.
Campaigns for Cameroon's October 12 presidential polls end at midnight on October 11. Voting begins at 8 a.m. on October 12. So far, there are still 10 candidates in the race. Reporting for Channel Africa, this is Moki Kinzeka in Yaoundé, Cameroon.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
So, election fever is gripping one of Africa's smallest yet most geopolitically strategic nations. Our focus today turns to the Seychelles, where the presidential contest is heading for a runoff. In the first round, held last week, neither candidate cleared the 50% threshold. Opposition leader Patrick Hermani secured 48.8%, whilst incumbent Wavel Ramkalwan trailed closely behind with 46.4%. Now, the runoff is scheduled for October 9 to the 11th and will determine who leads the archipelago for the next 5 years. On paper, the Seychelles is known as a tropical tourism haven, one of Africa's richest per capita, and a poster child for environmental excellence. But behind the scenes, behind the beaches and luxury resorts, lie serious political, social, and security challenges. A worsening heroin crisis, worries over leasing of land to foreign developers, climate vulnerability, and questions around governance and sovereignty. Well, to help us unpack what's at stake, we're now joined this morning by Dr. Oscar van Heerden, who's a research associate at the University of Johannesburg Centre for Africa Diplomacy and Leadership. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
All right. Perhaps, Seychelles, most people know it as beaches and holidays and not much else. And maybe we can start by I don't know if you can sketch a brief political and socio-economic background of the country. What do we know about Seychelles beyond its beaches?
Peter, it's one of our smallest countries on the continent. Seychelles, it's population of about only 120,000 people. So not very much, not very big. But as you've said, I think some of the broader foreign policy positions from both parties and all those that competed in this last election is non-alignment in the main, try to not take sides and so forth. But unfortunately, the small island population are plagued by heroin. It's plagued by environmental factors, as most island nations are. And then, of course, because it is such a big, attractive tourist destination, there's always competition around the leasing of land, foreign developers coming in, hotels being built, and who are the beneficiaries of that. These are the contentious issues. Now, according to the World Bank, very briefly, socioeconomically, the general population is much more well off than your average African from other countries. But that certainly doesn't take away from the fact that there are some huge socioeconomic challenges in the Seychelles.
So when we look at Patrick Hermani and Wavel Ramkalwan, what does it tell us about the politics of the country? Is it two main parties that have been battling over the years? What's the state of play?
Indeed, it is two main parties. United Seychelles Party, as some of your viewers might know, had been in power since 1977 and only lost power in 2020. So 5 years ago, they lost. And I think, there was a sea change, a winds of change. I think a great many of the Seychelles citizens wanted change from a party that had been in power for so long. And that's when the LDS party came in. They've given them a chance of 5 years, and that's the incumbent that wants to now go for a second term, but evidently did not do a fantastic job because none of them could get the 50% plus majority, and that's why there's now a runoff. The last time this happened was in 2015, and it did demonstrate, Peter, a serious division within the citizenry of the Seychelles.
So, the first round, Patrick Hermani slightly edged Ramkalwan. Does that translate into what might be a victory then in the runoff?
Not precisely. We must also bear in mind that it is the United Seychelles Party, Ramkalwan party, that actually won the majority of seats in the parliament. So they already now have control of the House, and yet the incumbent is not winning the race. So no, I don't think that's going to be a factor. I think that what they would want to see over the 2 days from the 9th to the 11th is an outright winner.
So what then might convince the citizens between October 9 and 11 to vote for either one?
I think that both candidates will have to go and hit the ground running. They need to go and convince their various supporters why they need to be the president. I think it's going to be a bit of an uphill for the candidate of the United Seychelles Party, only because they've been given so many decades to try and run the island for so long. And I think ultimately people are going to stick to the LDS and say, let's give the incumbent a second term before we judge.
And you mentioned this issue of drug abuse, heroin in particular, drug addiction. Did any of the presidential candidates talk about how they were going to deal with this?
Not in any significant and precise manner. I mean, of course, both of them acknowledge that there is this problem with the inflow of illicit drugs, particularly heroin, and that it needs to be taken care of. It needs to get rid of, particularly in the streets. amongst young people, but no one really coming up with any clear, tangible plan as to how they are going to do this.
Hermani himself once chaired the Agency for the Prevention of Drug Abuse and Rehabilitation, and I guess what it's saying is that he couldn't solve the problem then. He probably won't be able to do it now.
I think this is one of the factors that are counting against him, to be honest. People are aware that he occupied that particular position. There's still this problem. It does mean that the leadership was not there, the requisite leadership was not there to deal with the issue. And I think that that could potentially, be something that weighs against him. However, I do think that, as you've indicated, Peter, he is the candidate that's edging just slightly ahead. And who knows? He might tilt the scales.
Yeah, another issue is this story of land, foreign investment and sovereignty, especially things like the long-term lease of Assumption Island to a Qatari firm. Was this an election issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was a big issue. There's lots of controversy around the deal. Who's benefiting from it? Is it really going to be helpful to allow the Qataris to actually build this big hotel? And it's also obviously an issue of job creation and so forth. So no. It loomed very large on the election agenda because people felt that there was all kinds of untowardness with regards to the deal with the Qataris.
All right, I guess as a final question, beyond the runoff, whoever wins the presidency, what do they need to do in this term for, I guess, long-term stability for the island?
I think similarly to our situation here at home, Peter, they've got issues of unemployment, they've got issues of drugs, which then leads to crime and so on. This is not a good thing for a destination where people from all over the world comes to their wonderful and amazing beaches and so forth, tourism and the likes. So both candidates will have to convince the electorate why they are the candidates that's going to be able to deal effectively with some of these challenges.
Who do you think is going to win?
I do think that LDS party's Mani is going to edge over the line, in my opinion.
Okay, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much indeed for giving us some insights into the political life of the Seychelles and in particular these elections.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. That's Dr. Oscar van Heerden, a research associate at the University of Johannesburg Centre for African Diplomacy and Leadership, giving us some insights on the Seychelles elections.
This September, Channel Africa celebrates Heritage Month, a time to honor the stories, the rhythms, and the languages that make us who we are. Whether you're in Lagos or the shores of Zanzibar, to the mountains of Lesotho or the markets of Dakar, we are united in diversity.
Najivunia kuwa Mwafrika.
Kupondolera Afrika ndiye ndo wake.
Proudly African and fabulous.
Let us preserve our languages. Let's embrace our uniqueness. Let's embrace our cultures and celebrate the beauty of our continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800-428-428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa. Yo. Listen up. Check it out. Channel Africa is taking the digital game higher.
Check it out.
We are taking our digital platforms to the next level. For you, our loyal listeners.
You know where we at, right?
New website, a fresh new app, and they're on fire. Anytime, anywhere listening, Channel Africa brings the African sound to you.
It's the bomb, yo.
Stay locked. The future is crystal clear with us. Your new way to experience Channel Africa is almost here. Africa, stand tall and get ready. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
24 minutes past 8 Central African time. Let's talk about African journalists now. So they across the continent have gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia for a landmark workshop. This is on women, peace and security. It's titled Shaping the Narrative, African Journalists Meeting on Women, Peace and Security. The workshop, organized by the Office of the Special Envoy of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission on Women, Peace and Security, aims to strengthen media engagement and amplify women's voices in peace and security reporting. Joining us now to discuss is Defin Kituku, who is communication lead at the Office of the Minister for Gender in Kenya, to reflect on the first day's activities and discuss the importance of this meeting for promoting gender equality and inclusive peace processes across Africa. Defin, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Fomzo. Fomzo, did I get it right?
Defin, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hello, Defin. Please just check that you haven't muted yourself there.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on there, but that's Defin Kituku. We'll try. I don't know if we even have time now. We have 3 minutes. All right. Communication lead at the Office of the Minister for Gender in Kenya. And she was to join us to discuss the recent gathering of African journalists in Addis Ababa on the agenda of women, connecting that to peace and security in the region, on the continent rather, and seeing the role that media can play in advancing that agenda. Defin, are you there now? No. Okay. Let's take a look at this story now. The Global Summit Flotilla has once again set sail for Gaza after spending several days in Greek waters for repairs. This follows last week's drone attacks on the flotilla and comes despite repeated warnings from Israel, which has vowed to use any means necessary to stop the boats from reaching the besieged enclave. The flotilla now consists of about 47 civilian boats carrying essential supplies such as milk, baby formula, diapers and medical equipment to support Gaza's 2 million residents living under siege. Bunolo Maribe has more.
The Global Summit Flotilla includes activists such as lawyers, parliamentarians and other activists from dozens of countries. Since setting sail in August, it has heightened international tensions, especially following several drone attacks that caused some damage to vessels, although no one was injured. The flotilla has blamed Israel, which has not responded directly, but stated it would use all means to prevent the boats from reaching Gaza. Despite these comments, Swedish activist Greta Thunberg says the flotilla remains committed to delivering aid to the besieged enclave.
We are continuing our journey towards Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid to a population that is being systematically starved. That's a continuation of decades and decades of suffocating oppression, apartheid and occupation. There are over 2 million people who are living trapped under a siege, who are being systematically starved by Israel. And we are doing our bare minimum and stepping up when our governments are not fulfilling their legal obligations to act to prevent a genocide.
Several countries have expressed their support for the flotilla's mission and are committed to assisting its safe passage, with Greece's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yorgos Yerapetraitis, saying the country will ensure the flotilla's security is up to par.
What is happening now is there is a number of boats sailing towards Gaza. There is a small number of boats currently ports of Crete, and we will guarantee the safe sailing. That's important. We have already informed the Israeli government about the participation of Greek citizens into this, and we will make sure that everything goes well.
With Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Albares echoing the same sentiment.
In international law, there is a very clear principle, and is the free navigation of seas. And we are talking about people that have a peaceful and humanitarian objective, that are not threat to anyone, and that they are moving freely on the seas because they can do it. So I don't see why anyone would object to that or would want to harm them. And as we do with all our citizens in the world, when they are moving legally in places where they can freely do it, we will provide them with all our consular, diplomatic and political protection.
Italy has urged the flotilla's organizers to accept a proposal to drop off their aid supplies in Cyprus and hand them to the Catholic Church's Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem for distribution in Gaza. However, the flotilla's organizers have since rejected this plan, with Greek flotilla organizer Iosonas Apostopoulos remaining adamant about reaching the Gaza Strip.
Our next destination is Gaza. Our mission is to break the illegal Israeli siege and create a people's humanitarian corridor. We rise to end the genocide of the Palestinian people. We sail against the complicity of our countries. Demand safe passage for our vessels, because no one is free until we are all free. All eyes on Gaza, all eyes on the fleet.
Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
Now let's get our news headlines from Jolane Tulongwe, our time being 8:30 Central African.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, a heavy security presence has thwarted a straight third day youth-led protests across several Moroccan cities. A Nigerian man who was deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he and 6 others were secretly transported to Togo by Ghanaian authorities, and finally more than 2,000 British military personnel have started legal action after being given ear protection they say was faulty and led to deafness and other life-changing injuries. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get another sports update, and it's good morning to Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
We pick off with rugby news. Argentina have lost fly half Thomas Albornoz and scrum half Gonzalo Garcia to injury ahead of the Rugby Championship rematch with the Springboks at Twickenham. Replacements Gonzalo Bedrano and Nicolas Roja have been called up and will join the Pumas in London ahead of the clash. Albornoz, who had only recently recovered from a hand injury, scored off the bench in last week's 67-30 defeat to the Boks in Durban. Unfortunately, a 26-year-old has suffered a new injury and will be unavailable on Saturday. On to football news. Amachita put up a fighting spirit and a performance, but were undone by the precision of group heavyweights France in a 2-1 defeat to the South Africans in their 2025 FIFA Under-20 World Cup opener on Monday. Anthony Beaumont put France ahead in the 25th minute at Estadio El Tinet in Rancagua in the Group E in Chile. Jody and Shin pulled one back from the spot in the 33rd minute. France edged the second half, though star forward Lucas Michal's late 80th minute winner came after 2 quick, strong chances to the South Africans. Amajita are expected to face off with New Caledonia on the 3rd of October. And the Northern Cape government, together with the different stakeholders, have invested millions into the inaugural Diamond and Dorings Kimberley Marathon. It is the first of its kind in the province and will be held in November, where about 2,000 runners are expected to take part. The winner of the marathon will walk away with $12,000. Premier Zamani Sol says this will not only attract elite runners but will also boost the province's economy.
We can't allow the economy of this town to be subdued and die on our watch. So we'll have to do all these strategic interventions in order to ensure that the economy of this town keep on growing. With the first quarter and the second quarter of this year, the economy grew by 1.2%, which was the highest in the province, which is even the highest, it could be the highest in the country because the average growth of the economy of South Africa is 0.7%. And Kimberley's economic growth was standing at 1.2%. And we need to build on that. We need to optimize the economic potential of this town.
And South Africa's President of Athletics South Africa, James Moloi, endorsed this marathon and says it should be an annual event.
Now all the cities or all the provinces are hosting big races. So this one is going to be very big. And at the time when we approach by the province to say they want to host it, I was the first person to be very excited to say, let us grow athletics in all areas. And we urge the development in the area to say, let's have more women in this area.
And finally, boxing news. President Paul Kagame received veteran Cameroonian French professional boxer Carlos Takam, who recently launched a boxing academy in Kigali. The academy was established last week by the Carlos Takam Foundation to promote and develop the sport of boxing across Africa. It aims to nurture young talent and provide opportunities for aspiring boxers to train professionally. During the meeting, Takam gifted the head of state an original WBC World Championship belt as a tribute to Rwanda and the mission of the foundation in the country. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figede Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now let's check in with what's happening in the world of business as we say good morning to Tabiso Lihugu.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
A very good morning. A German power utility, RWE, says it had withdrawn from Namibia's $10 billion green ammonia project, a blow to the country's ambitions to become a major hydrogen hub. The pullback is the latest example of companies reconsidering investments that is expensive to develop. RWE signed a preliminary non-binding memorandum of understanding with Hyphen in 2022 to take around 300,000 tons a year of ammonia, a compound used mostly to make fertilizer, from 2027. The South African National Treasury has implemented a 6-year performance-linked $3 billion incentive grant toward the delivery of trading services reforms. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says a notable underinvestment in trading services, namely water, sanitation and electricity in various metros, calls for urgent action by both national and local government. Addressing metropolitan municipality officials in Pretoria, Godongwana says an incentive-based grant for trading services will create accountability and predictability in grant allocation to the metros.
You know, at the moment, the issue of water and electricity is not properly managed in municipalities. So we've targeted the big ones for starters because they service a bigger community, that to help them restructure how those services are done.
The Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mining Development in Equatorial Guinea, Antonio Oburu Ondo, says that the country will open a new oil and gas licensing round in April to boost exploration and counter dwindling oil output. Ondo says that the licensing round will be launched in the second quarter of 2026, right after the details of timelines, application procedures and further information will be available. Chandulu Keke reports.
Opening in April and running until November, the licensing round offers 24 blocks, 2 of which are onshore and the rest offshore. Equatorial Guinea is a member of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and currently has 6 producing fields run by companies. The country has produced 241,000 barrels of oil per day at its peak in 2010, but output has since fallen to 55,000 barrels per day in 2023.
Businesses in more than 30 African countries, including South Africa, are facing uncertainty ahead of the expiry of a vital trade agreement allowing duty-free exports to the United States. The 25-year-old African Growth and Opportunity Act hasn't yet been extended by the Trump administration, despite efforts of African envoys. The BBC's Akisa Wandera has the details.
Across the continent, workers say they're holding their breath, unsure whether their livelihoods will survive if additional tariffs are imposed on their goods. Envoys from African countries have been pushing for an extension, but so far Washington has given no clear signal. For decades, the deal has been seen as a cornerstone of U.S.-Africa economic relations.
The US dollar is on the back foot in cautious trading as investors brace for a possible US government shutdown that would halt economic data releases, including the crucial jobs report later this week. Government funding will expire at midnight today unless Republicans and Democrats agree to a last-minute temporary spending deal, with President Donald Trump and his opponents making little progress at a White House meeting. The payrolls report, crucial for decision-making by policymakers at the Federal Reserve, is scheduled for Friday, and a delay could leave the central bank flying blind on the labor market. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,483 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13.20. Kenya, 128 shilling, 365. And Zambia, 23 kwacha 70. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 real 33. Russia, 82 rubles 83. India, 88 rupees 70. China, 71 12. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 27 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Gold is trading at $3,847 and platinum $1,590 per ounce. Brent crude oil $67.53 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, let's go back to that story we were touching on earlier and try again as we talk about African journalists gathering in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, from the continent. And this is for a workshop on women, peace and security. It's titled Shaping the Narrative, African Journalists Meeting on Women, Peace and Security. The workshop, organized by the Office of the Special Envoy of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission on Women, Peace and Security, aims to strengthen media engagement and amplify women's voices in peace and security reporting. Joining us to tell us more is Daphne Kituku, who is communication lead at the Office of the Minister for Gender in Kenya. Daphne, thank you for joining us. We try again. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Asanda. How are you? Did I get it right?
Hello, Devin, can you hear me?
Good morning.
All right, could you start by giving us a brief overview of the first day's activities at this workshop?
Good morning, Asanda. Well, let me start by saying I'm delighted to be on your show this morning, and good morning to our Channel Africa listeners. Let me say we gathered here in Addis at the AU headquarters, and while we're here, we're trying to strengthen the women, peace, and security agenda in Africa. And we're having journalists from across the world, from across Africa. So what we did yesterday was a lot of workshopping, and we understand that media plays a key role in advancing the agenda of the WPS. We look at the key foundations of women, peace, and security as preventive, recovery, and we basically tried first to understand what do we mean by women, peace, and security agenda. What has AU done? What is in place? And there was a lot of, of course, best exchange of best practices. We had lecturers, or rather people who took us through. We had trainings throughout the day, and we were able to just brainstorm on what we feel we can do to make the WPS agenda better.
From your perspective, what are some of the main challenges that women journalists face when reporting on issues around women, their peace and security?
Obviously, the first one is this data breakdown. We find that women, especially women in the newsroom, are also victims of gender-based violence. There is lack of enough capacity building. So in many instances, the journalists do not really know how to report or how to really handle the conflict issues. There's also the issue of logistics and funding. There is the issue of stereotyping. And there's the issue of lack of communities resilience. Some communities, especially if we look at elections, they're quite, we'll call it quite hostile towards, the journalists, the women. These are some of the challenges I think the women in media face in regard to WPS.
How can stronger media coverage, whether it's by female or male journalists, influence policy and public awareness when it comes to regarding women's participation in peace and security, especially on our continent of Africa?
Media does a key role. Media shapes, first it shapes perception. Media amplifies. I'll give a case study of, in Nigeria when we had the Boko Haram. It was the media that amplified that to the global stage. So through amplification and through telling the stories, we're able to shift, the public discourse and public consciousness, and that also touches on legislators as well. So we're able to shape policy.
Just yesterday here on Rise and Shine, we had a conversation and covering the lead up to Uganda's elections for 2026. And we noted the absence of women candidates on the ballots contesting the lineup, that there aren't any. Even though a few had put forward their nominations with the Electoral Commission in the country, what role can the support of more women in political leadership on our continent play in further advancing this agenda that we're speaking about and in ensuring that women's voices are heard when it comes to peace-building contributions? What do political parties have as a role?
The first thing will be to look at it from an affirmative action way. I'll give a case study in my country, that is in Kenya. We have affirmative action where we're actually trying to pass what is called a two-third gender bill that guides on it actually regulates both public service, private service. So you're able to and what also we do, we nominate more women to these elective positions. It's a grounding policy, which makes it easier for women to be able to be onboarded, because the society, especially in Africa, tends to be quite patriarchal. So we have to be very intentional with the policies we have as countries in Africa. First, we have to, as a government needs to invest heavily in its women. We need to pass bills that give women an advantage of nomination. We need to, just eradicate issues that, make women not too brave to go for these seats. Yes, I think a good benchmark is what we're having in Kenya, the 2/3 gender bill, because it's such a groundbreaker for women.
So what impact or outcomes would you like to see emerge then from the next day of gatherings at the conference or workshop?
We're excited. Today we'll have quite a number of deliberations. So one of those we'd like to see is implementation of the policy, because the AU has great frameworks, especially on the WPS agenda. And the countries as well in Africa, as you know, most of them have what you call the NAPs, the National Action Plans. We do have so we just need to push and see how then are we able to monitor and evaluate to make sure that all these frameworks are implemented in the respective countries. How then are we also able to make sure the media has its space, the media is well, the capacity is there, the good policies are implemented. For me, what I'd really love to see is just the implementation, especially of the NAPs.
All right, great stuff, and thanks for joining us, giving us a snippet there in terms of what's happened so far, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the rest of those deliberations. Defin, we appreciate your time as Channel Africa again.
Thank you, Asanda. I hope I got it right.
Yes, that is it, Asanda. Thanks, Defin. Kituku is a communication lead at the Office of the Minister of Gender in Kenya, talking to us and sharing her insights on the first day of this important workshop, a gathering of African journalists from across the continent.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's Commission for Gender Equality says that it's engaged with thousands of men and boys across the country on the importance of building healthy, positive forms of masculinity. The aim, well, that's to help men and boys see themselves as allies in the fight against gender-based violence. Whilst these initiatives have received attention in the media, the Commission says that there's still concern about whether the message is being meaningfully understood and whether the media is doing enough to challenge harmful stereotypes. Well, to discuss the role of the media in changing attitudes and ending gender-based violence, we're now joined by the Commission for Gender Equality spokesperson, Jabu Baloyi. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the program.
Peter, good day and greetings to the wonderful listeners of Channel Africa.
So, Jabu, what are your thoughts in terms of how South African media has been reporting gender-based violence in recent years?
What we have picked up, Peter, and based on research and based on the work that we do as a commission, at times the sensationalization of issues of gender-based violence. You might find during the Women's Month or 16 days of activism, an issue that happened in April, one newspaper or one media house brings it to the fore as if it's something that has happened now. And also, not also realizing the impact it has on people. Because some men think that, during Women's Month, that's where they need to do this carnage. Some men think during 16 days of activism, that is the period where they do something and walk media limelight. You might have even seen the reporting this during Women's Month in the province that I'm coming from, Limpopo. There were lots of cases that were reported, particularly on August 9, specifically. There were women who were killed journalists. However, they need to be taken through the ropes, by the wings, by people like yourselves, people like Musakina, to understand the intricacies of objective and fair and just reporting. That doesn't defeat the purpose of what the Commission, like ourselves and the Human Rights Commission, are trying to do in society. Hence, you will see even the messaging from the Commission. It's not that messaging that is bashing and trying to trivialize things about men. But what is it that men need to do in order to be on board? Because we know there are good men out there. There are lots and lots of them. But there are few of us that are also on the wrong side of the law and do things in the wrong way because of various issues that, they might have experienced, because of culture, because of stereotypes that we try to dismantle.
All right, so frequency of reporting is one issue, that we're not doing it enough, maybe just targeting times of the year, special months, etc. But you also suggest there's misreporting. In other words, we're not writing these stories properly. Is this out of ignorance or being caught up in the stereotypes and essentially retweeting them?
It's the issue is that, it's the ethical and integrity conduct, Brapita. To some, it's no longer there. Some retweet things, and when you retweet something, you are party to that. You are saying, I am somehow au fait with the issues, yet you are not. You're just retweeting. Secondly, it could be ignorance. Not understanding how they impact, because some people retweet things not knowing that their standing in society could be of that of nature, just like a person of your caliber, Brabida. In case you retweet something that could have a far-reaching mileage and impact in society, only to find that it was information. In the era of AI, people try to generate things. How many people, let me give you an example. How many people have been killed recently through AI to say that, this person is no longer there? And people retweet. I had a colleague of mine sitting with me last week. He said one of the soccer players, Ian Robben, it's no more. I said, that can't be true, because, they were reporting about him yesterday. So let's verify. So I verified for him. I said, learn not to retweet things or learn not to forward messages when you see them. Do your due diligence. And it's the similar thing with journalists. Some of them, they don't do that proper check on issues and also just carry on with. And that has got a ripple effect on the work that we do as a Commission for Gender Equality.
So what's your message then to media houses, editors, and maybe journalists themselves? How can they better do this job?
The best way to do it is to look at your sources. Do not look on online sources and take it as a gospel truth. Second to which, also do research as an individual. Make sure that you can stand the test of time with the story that you write as a journalist, and also be ethical in the conduct of when you are doing these things, because this carnage needs all of us. We're not blaming journalists per se. Even if you look at it, but the responsible reporting is supposed to be there so that we do not perpetuate the stereotypes that are there in society. Also, we mustn't always, as media people, ensure that we must ensure that fair balance and objective reporting, particularly when it comes to men. We mustn't trivialize issues and making men as if point issues that are very genuine to men, and also be fair on them, because some of the men are being killed, most of the men are being abused, and if we do that, I am telling you, we'll have a proper society whereby we'll look at the issues and we'll look at the root cause of gender-based violence than looking who does what, who kills women, who kills men, who abuses men. But it's not a competition at the end of the day. It's about us approving this and eradicating the scourge of gender-based. And also, to the good journalists who are reporting wonderfully, we say big up to you, and you support the work that we do as a Commission for Gender Equality and other institutions. That can, if we can also hold one another as people, will eradicate the scourge of gender-based violence in our country, not in our country, but the entire continent.
Javu, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much indeed, and please keep up the good work that you guys are doing at the Commission. Thanks for your time.
You're most welcome. Thanks. Bye.
That's Jabu Baloy, a spokesperson at Gender Equality, the Commission for Gender Equality, talking about the role the media should be playing in telling the GBV story. Well, somebody who's got a story to tell us about what's coming up on the move after 9 o'clock is Palesa. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We're good. How are you?
Doing good, thank you. Okay, today on the move, we start off to speak about false accusations, not particularly just gender-based violence, but in any way, because it can be quite reputationally damaging. So even at work, perhaps they've been said that you stole money, maybe you've been accused of cheating on public platforms and many other things. Those can really take your reputation down the drain. So we're going to be speaking about that, what it truly means to restore your reputation after being falsely accused in the first hour of the show. It's a tough one.
Such a hard one, that one. I mean, literally, the first headlines often are the ones that stick. You can have an apology weeks later, but sheesh, the damage is probably done by then.
And you would have spent years building that reputation.
And especially now in the age of social media, literally one post from someone can ruin your entire reputation.
I don't know why Peter must be cancelled, but cancel him. That's how we tweet.
And of course, we wrap up in the final hour of the show with our Money Matters. Today, we're speaking about living debt-free, something that we all wish we could do, but how? That's what we'll be finding out.
But some debt is good debt, so I don't know if that's something that will be factored into that conversation. To
Perhaps.
say, don't feel too bad if you have a little bit, as long as you're not overwhelmed.
Yeah, but over time, don't you want to just live a life where all your money is for you?
Cool. We like that. So that's it.
That's how we come to the end of this 30 of September's edition of Rise and Shine. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 till 9. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. And I'll see you guys in October. Take care. Have a lovely day.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Top stories: Asaba, a heavy security presence thwarts youth-led protests across Morocco, and 2,000 British military file legal action. Good morning, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe. A heavy security presence has thwarted for a straight day youth-led protests across several Moroccan cities. Demonstrators have sought to rally for improvements to the public health and education systems. The protests were organized online by a loosely formed anonymous youth group calling itself Gen Z 212, using platforms including TikTok, Instagram and gaming application Discord. The government and judicial authorities have not yet communicated on the incidents and arrests. A Nigerian man who was deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he and 6 others were secretly transported to Togo by Ghanaian authorities. The man said they were abandoned at the Ghana-Togo border without documentations. The BBC's Thomas Nadi has the story.
The Nigerian deportee, who wishes to remain anonymous, said they are stuck in a hotel in Togo where the lack of documentation and language barrier have made life unbearable. The deportees are pursuing separate lawsuits against the Ghanaian government and the Trump administration for rights violations. The U.S. government's third-party deportation policy has faced criticism, with several countries pushing back against the strategy.
Crime intelligence head in South Africa, General Dumisani Khumalo, says they have identified 5 individuals who are part of a cartel that has allegedly penetrated the political sphere. The Big Five cartel, as he terms it, is alleged to have syndicates operating under it. He says the cartel is operating throughout the country with its headquarters in Gauteng. Khumalo, who is testifying before the Madlanga Commission, says prominent figures such as Vusumuzi Kat Matlala and Kadiso K.T. Molefe have been identified as members of the Big Five cartel.
The Big Five has already penetrated the political sphere, and there are documented cases of high-profile connections in the political arena. Senior politicians alleged to